Well, welcome to today's talk, and we're continuing the series on the Four Noble Truths. And today we're continuing with the fourth Noble Truth, or the Noble Eightfold Path, and today we're talking about the third path factor of right speech. Oh, I seem to have something in my eye. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the prescription, I guess, or the treatment plan, the lifestyle plan for helping us increase our happiness and decrease our suffering. And for those who wish for it, it also leads to getting out of the cosmic prison that is samsara and attaining nibbana, arahantship, freedom from suffering forevermore. So the third path factor is right speech, and I'm continuing to use the book by Venerable Nyanatilaka that you can find online. In fact, I'm using it online now at urbandharma.org/pdf/wordofthebuddha.pdf. So the third factor is right speech, or Samma Vacca. So what now is right speech? Herein someone avoids lying and abstains from it. He or she speaks the truth, is devoted to the truth, is reliable, worthy of confidence, not a deceiver of men or women, and when they are at a meeting, or being at a meeting, or amongst people, or in the midst of their relatives, or in a society, or in the king's court, and called upon and asked as a witness to tell what they know, they answer, if they know nothing, I know nothing, and if he knows, he answers, I know. If he or she has seen nothing, she answers, I have seen nothing, and if they have seen, they answer, I have seen. Thus, they never knowingly speak a lie, either for the sake of their own advantage, or for the sake of another person's advantage, or for the sake of any advantage whatsoever. He avoids tale-bearing and abstains from it. So before we go down to that, abstaining from lying. So the first movement in right speech is that, avoiding the evil. So we're working through that right effort of letting go of the evil and unwholesome, abstaining from lying, because we accept that lying is evil and unwholesome. And then the next wrong speech that we abstain from is tale-bearing. He avoids tale-bearing and abstains from it. What she has heard here, she does not repeat there, so as to cause dissension there. And what he has heard there, he does not repeat here, so as to cause dissension here. Thus, they unite those that are divided, and those that are united they encourage. Concord gladdens them. They delight and rejoice in concord, and it is concord that they spread by their words. So in tale-bearing here, we don't hear him speaking of truth. So it doesn't matter whether the tale is true or not. If telling that tale will cause dissension, then you don't say that, even if it is true. If saying that truth will cause people to divide and reduces community harmony, then it's best off if those things aren't said. This is in turn, particularly not so much in talking about social issues. Like, this doesn't mean that we don't talk about things that are challenging to talk about. This means, I believe, talking about gossiping. You know, that talking about the minutiae of our lives, so that in such a way that it reduces community harmony. That, say, if I told a tale about somebody, and maybe, this is something I need to personally get better at, that doesn't paint them in a very good light, even if it's true, then that may reduce their prestige and standing in the eyes of the people that I'm telling that tale to. And maybe that's not something that I should be doing. So, abstaining from tale bearing. Don't talk about what happened there over here if it could possibly cause problems. Abstaining from harsh language. He speaks words that are gentle and soothing to the ear. So now we've actually made another step forward, because we've come to a somewhat more, we're going from the very gross wrong speech of lying, and we're becoming less gross and moving towards the subtle. So maybe when we are speaking and it is in the right place and it is truth and it is not in stuff that is going to cause division, right? Then we be speaking that truth in words that are gentle and soothing to the ear, and loving, words that go to the heart and are courteous, friendly, and agreeable to many. It does mean that agreeable to many, not necessarily to everybody, because you can't please all the people all the time. It's just impossible. So one has to be realistic about that. However, this doesn't mean, just because you want your words to be agreeable, that you don't speak inconvenient truths at the appropriate time, where speaking that inconvenient truth will do good and cause benefit. For example, if we are a parent or a teacher, we need to provide guidance to our children and to our students, and if we refrain from speaking that, then we're not doing the right thing by them. We're not providing the guidance and correction that they deserve and should be able to should rightfully expect from the roles that we're in. So sometimes when you're in that sort of role, you have to speak words that are not agreeable but beneficial. And those words, particularly the words that are beneficial but not agreeable, really need to be spoken in this gentle, soothing and loving manner. Let's face it, if somebody is scolding us, it's almost impossible to hear the content of what they're saying to us over the emotional response to being scolded. Nobody likes being scolded. It's upsetting, it's distressing, and we can't help but go into defensive mode. And we try to listen, like kids will try and listen, students will try and listen, but the very manner of giving that correction in a frustrated or angry manner makes it actually harder for them to hear it and take it on. Therefore, it makes it less effective, really. we actually reduce the effectiveness of our guidance when we overlay it with negative emotion. So, we avoid harsh language. We speak gently and soothing, particularly if what we have to say is disagreeable. But of course, wherever possible, we're going to try and be largely agreeable. Excuse me for a sec. Now, I've often quoted already in this series of talks, and frequently in other talks I give, one of my favourite similes, the simile of the saw. And the really interesting thing about the simile of the saw is that actually the Buddha gives it in the context of the monks engaging in wrong speech. So it is a particularly relevant to this, but he goes out and does worst case scenario, if you like. So he posits a worst case scenario of robbers and murderers sawing through your limbs and joints. Should robbers and murderers saw? Now, notice we're not saying chop. This is a saw here. So the process of sawing is slow. So this is a drawn-out torture. So his worst-case scenario is a drawn-out torture. And in that situation, in that worst-case scenario, he says that your mental and emotional response is your responsibility, and regardless of how badly those murderers and robbers are treating you, if you should give way to anger and threat, you would not be following the Buddha's advice. So their behaviour is not an excuse for you to give way to anger and threat. Even in the worst case scenario of people intentionally and maliciously subjecting you to protracted torture, even in that case, in that worst case scenario, if you should give way to anger and threat, you would not be following his advice. So that is what are you supposed to do? Well, you should train yourselves. Undisturbed my mind shall remain. No evil words shall escape our lips. Friendly and full of sympathy shall we remain, with a heart full of love, and free from any hidden malice. That purpose for that, and that person we shall penetrate with loving thoughts, wide, deep, boundless, free from anger and hatred. And he goes on to say, if you could respond that way with sympathy and kindness to someone chopping your arms and legs off, or sawing your arms and legs off, which is actually worse, is there anything anybody could say to you that could upset you? You know, it's only words, you know. If I'm supposed to say my mind will remain undisturbed, unshaken, I won't get upset. I won't get upset even if they're sawing my arms and legs off. So how could any words upset me? Even if, so the idea is, although I'm going to watch my words to make sure they're gentle and sweet, somebody else's harsh words, well, why should I get upset with that? Why can't I be responding with loving kindness? So if I can respond with loving kindness to somebody killing me, literally killing me, then surely I can respond with loving kindness to mere unpleasant words, harsh words, unpleasant words, words that I don't agree with, don't want to hear, abusive words. I mean, an abusive word is still just a word, you know. It's not a saw. And so in this, he says, our response to other people's speech is our responsibility. Just because they did wrong speech is not a justification for us to do wrong speech. It's not a good enough reason. So, yeah, that's not easy, right? So it means that we actually can't be a victim. Like, I couldn't help getting angry because they. Well, you know, I couldn't help it. That's giving up your power, right? If it's their fault, then they've got all the power and you've got no power. However, if I take responsibility and go, regardless of what they do or say, I would like to train myself to respond with compassion and kindness. Regardless of what they say, they can say what they like. Well, they will say what they like. That's just the reality. People will say what they want to say, right? And when they do, my mind will remain undisturbed. And let's have a look at Ajahn Sujato's translation again. Here it is. Here we go. And so he's got the low down bandits down there. But up here you can say, like, there's 5 ways which others might criticize you. Their speech might be timely or untimely, true or false, gentle or harsh, beneficial or harmful, from a heart of love or from secret hate. So, you know, a malicious person might criticize you in an untimely, false, harsh, harmful manner from secret hate. And even if that's the case, in any of these ways, if that happens, you should train like this. Our minds will remain unaffected. We will blurt out no bad words. We will remain full of compassion with a heart of love and no secret hate. We will meditate spreading a heart of love to that person. And with them as a basis, we will meditate spreading a heart like a catskin bag, whatever that simile means, I'm not quite sure, to everyone in the world. I guess that's soft and smooth. Abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. That's how you should train. I suppose catskin would be both soft and flexible, right? So if I have a soft and flexible mind or heart, so I meditate spreading a heart like a soft and flexible heart to everybody in the world, abundant, expansive, limitless. And even if low-down bandits were to sever you limb from limb, anyone who had a malevolent thought, so that's an evil thought, an angry thought, a thought with ill will, not goodwill. Anyone who had an evil thought on that account would not be following my instructions. If that happens, you should train like this. Our minds will remain unaffected. We will blurt out no bad words. We will remain full of compassion with a heart of love and no secret hate. We will meditate spreading a heart of love to that person, and with them as a basis, we will meditate spreading a heart of love to everyone in the world, abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. That's how you should train. If you would frequently reflect on this advice, the simile of the saw, Do you see any criticism, large or small, that you could not endure? No, sir. Well, mendicants, you should frequently reflect on this advice the simile saw. This will be for your lasting welfare and happiness. And that's what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the monks were happy with what the Buddha said. So we frequently reflect that, regardless of what they say, my responsibility is for my mind to remain unaffected. What does that mean? It means that I shouldn't, that my responsibility is to not get upset about it. All right? So if I get upset, then my mind's been affected by what they say. If I get angry, then my mind has been affected by what they say. If I get depressed, then my mind has been affected by what they say. Whereas if I go, okay, well, you're saying that, but I'm going to not blurt out any bad words. I'm going to have compassion. I'm going to be full of goodwill, not ill will. I'm going to be filled with loving kindness, and I'm starting with you. I'm going to radiate loving kindness out. And I just repeat that to myself over and over again, like rehearse it. In fact, it is rehearsing it. It's a long mantra, not a short mantra, but you use this mantra over and over again to rehearse your response. Okay, now what happens? Particularly if you're in a situation where you have to be around people with unskillful words, or with who have a habit of saying harmful, hurtful things. If you're around people who habitually say harmful, hurtful things to you, then this is what you need to practice. You need to rehearse this response, and you need to rehearse it again and again and again, because at first it doesn't come naturally. It's hard to do it. But if we rehearse this response and we imagine it happening in our mind, and imagine that person, that family member, that work colleague, that person at school, whatever that person is, I'm going to remember that they said that, what sort of thing they did, and then I'm going to imagine myself doing this. And I'm going to imagine myself responding like this next time they speak to me. And so next time a person with wrong speech, micca vaca, comes and inflicts their wrong speech upon you, you take your attention off their wrong speech, and particularly you don't give any attention to the content of their wrong speech, and you put all your attention on your own self and your own response and the processes that are happening in your own heart. And the focus of our response is basically to have a karmically beautiful response here. My mind will remain unaffected. So I'm going to take my attention off you at that, and maybe I might need to do some mindfulness of body to notice my heart beating, because when people say cruel words to me, my heart starts going, and my breath gets a bit ragged. And so if I put my attention on my heart and my breath, then I can actually help my body to calm down. Yeah, mindfulness of breathing helps the body to calm down, particularly if you've done a lot of breath meditation. Then just the very act of paying attention to the breath will calm the body down. And then while the body's calming down, you can start bringing up this response. My mind will be filled with compassion. I will have goodwill, not ill will. Okay? So let's go back to right speech. Because there's a fourth aspect to right speech, the 4 types of right speech. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is vain or frivolous or useless talk. Now, this 4th one is particularly of interest to monks and nuns because, and to serious practitioners. Because when you engage in frivolous talk, you're not being mindful and you are not really paying attention to yourself and the practice in that moment, usually. So in frivolous, vain talk, it's basically talk that's useless, and you could be spending your time on more useful activities. So it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's useless. And if your goal is to get out of samsara and become an arahant, what are you doing wasting your time on frivolous talk? But for ordinary everyday people, I suppose time wasting happens. But the trouble with frivolous talk is that because you're not being particularly mindful, it very easily slides into harmful talk. And it's, a sort of situation where your bad habits can kick up because you're not paying attention. So particularly for monks and nuns, but anybody who's very serious about the practice, you don't really want to waste time talking about stuff that's just not important. So they avoid vain talk or frivolous talk and abstain from it. They speak at the right time in accordance with the truth. They speak what is useful, speaks of the law and the discipline, and this kind of speech is like a treasure, uttered at the right moment, accompanied by correct arguments, moderate and full of sense. This is called right speech. So what is right speech? Speaking at the right time in accordance with the facts, speaking what is useful or beneficial, speaking of the law and the disciplines. And let me find, there's another translation of this because I'm not sure what they mean there by law. 10. Okay. How is purity fourfold by way of speech? When a person gives up lying. Oh, okay, so we're starting at number 1 again. You don't mind, do you? I hope not. So if they're summoned to a council, an assembly, a family meeting, a guild, or to the royal court, and asked to bear witness, please, mister, say what you know. Not knowing, they say, I don't know. Knowing, they say, I know. Not seeing, they say, I don't see. And seeing, they say, I see. So they don't deliberately lie for the sake of themselves or another, or for some trivial worldly reason. They give up divisive speech. They don't repeat in one place what they heard in another, so as to divide people against each other. Instead, they reconcile those who are divided, supporting unity, delighting in harmony, loving harmony, speaking words that promote harmony. They give up harsh speech. They speak in a way that's mellow, pleasing to the ear, lovely, going to the heart, polite, likeable, and agreeable to people. Here we go. They give up talking nonsense. Don't talk nonsense. Don't talk rubbish. Their words are timely, true, and meaningful, in line with the teaching and training. They say things at the right time which are valuable, reasonable, and succinct and beneficial. Ooh, that sounds nice. Shall we go through right speech again here? Because we've gone through 4 kinds of wrong speech. So The words are timely, so at the right time, true, meaningful, in line with the teaching and training. That is not contradicting the truth of the teaching and training. And they say things at the right time, not the wrong time, which are valuable, not worthless, reasonable, not just ridiculous and stupid, nonsense, reasonable, not nonsense, succinct, not long-winded, going on and on and on. Maybe I get that one wrong too. I could get better at succinct, I think. Succinct is like not spending 25 words when 5 will do. Not using complicated words when simple words would explain it better, more clearly. And beneficial, not useless and definitely not harmful. So this is fourfold purity by way of speech. I like the next. What's purity threefold by way of mind? When a certain person is content, they don't covet the wealth and belongings of others and thinking, oh, if only their belongings were mine. They have a kind heart and loving intentions. May these sentient beings live free of enmity, and ill will. Enmity is the state of having enemies. Untroubled and happy. So that's right speech. Let's go back to Jnanataloka and see what else he's got to say about it. Now he's got mundane and supramundane speech. So we had right speech before, and now we'll look at right speech in more detail, and that is the ordinary, everyday type of right speech that ordinary people can have, and then the extremely special sort of right speech that the fully awakened noble ones can have. So here the Buddha says right speech is of two kinds: abstaining from lying, from harsh language, from vain talk. This is called mundane right speech, which yields worldly fruits and brings good results. Lokiya samavacha. But the avoidance of the practice of this fourfold wrong speech, the abstaining, desisting, refraining therefrom, the mind being holy, being turned away from the world, and conjoined the path with the holy path being pursued. This is called supramundane right speech, which is not of the world, which is supramundane and conjoined with path. So I'm going to look at Bhante Sujato's translation of that now, because I found that a little bit complicated. Majjhima Nikaya 117, which I've got up here. Right intention, speech. Okay. Oh, I really like this one. Speech. This has got a little bit more detail. That's an excerpt, but we'll go through this. Bhikkhus, right view comes first. Oh, this is that circling thing. Remember we had this before. So these three things circle around each path factor as you work with it. It's this is about how do we work with right speech. How do we improve our speech to get it even better? So right view comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong speech as wrong speech and right speech as right speech. This is one's right view. Because you can't fix the problem unless you understand it is a problem. If you don't recognize, oh, that's wrong speech, then how can you stop doing it? So right view's got to come first in this process of improving our speech. And what bhikkhus is wrong speech? False speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, and gossip. This is wrong speech. So that quickly went through those four. And what is right speech? right speech, I say, is twofold. Let me pop that up a bit. There is the right speech affected by taints. So taints is our own personal defilements, our own bad habits, capacity for making mistakes, those kinds of things. Right speech that is still affected by our bad habits, but it's still right speech, so it partakes of merit, or it creates a good effect in our heart and mind and in the world, and it ripens in the acquisitions. So right speech causes you to gain stuff in the world, I guess. We came across this phrase last week. I'm still not comfortable with it. And there is right speech that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. And what, because, is right speech that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, ripening in the acquisitions? Abstinence from false speech, abstinence from malicious speech, abstinence from harsh speech, abstinence from gossip. This is right speech affected by taints, ripening in the acquisitions. And what, because, is right speech that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path? The desisting from the four kinds of verbal misconduct, the abstaining, refraining, abstinence from them in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is right speech that is noble, a factor of the path. One makes an effort to abandon wrong speech and enter upon right speech. This is one's right effort. Mindfully, one abandons wrong speech. Mindfully, one enters upon and abides in right speech. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus, these three states run and circle around right speech, that is, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. And you can see he has really, the Blessed One has described a very dynamic meditation process here, which we can do both on the mat and out in the so-called everyday life. So we practice it, we learn it on the mat, and then we take this process out in the life with us. So how do we do this? Mindfully. Well, first of all, we got to back up here. It begins with right view. Okay, so first of all, we understand what wrong speech is wrong speech and right speech is right speech, and this is right view, and we start with that. And then mindfully, when we understand which is which and we're able to skillfully discern, so this is a whole process too, mindfully noticing. Now it's really hard to do mindfulness of speech on the mat, so we do mindfulness of the mental speech, yeah? And then when we come out into the world, we apply that. How can we do mindfulness of speech, because we get really carried away with it. It's a hard thing to do, mindfulness of speech. So we can do it in little chunks and set ourselves up. Okay, in this next interaction, I'm going to really watch my speech. So understanding what is right speech, what is wrong speech, then when I'm actually speaking, I've got the hiccups, excuse me. While speaking, we use our mindfulness to notice if we are either doing wrong speech or about to do wrong speech, and we mindfully make an effort to abandon right speech. So we have to mindfully use mindfulness to notice, and then we use right effort to abandon it, and abandon wrong speech and enter into right speech. And those three things are going to go, right view, that's wrong speech. Right effort, abandon wrong speech. Right view, this is right speech. Right effort, bring up right speech. Enter into right speech. Mindfulness, notice, mindfully notice, that's wrong speech. And around, using those three path factors, going around and round the issue of right speech. It's quite a dynamic process that he describes here. We need our mindfulness to stay mindfully aware, particularly because speaking probably doesn't happen a lot sitting on the mat, does it? Mostly it happens out in the daily life. So this is clearly a meditation practice that is done in the daily life while we are speaking. Doesn't sound like meditation, does it? And yet, meditation in a Buddhist sense is the purification of the mind. And this gives us a process of purifying the mind whilst dynamically involved in the world. So really there's at no time that the practice isn't relevant. It's not like we practice on the mat and then we stop practicing and going out into the real world. No, we take the practice with us, and particularly in many of these path factors, the practice is done in the real world, not so much on the mat. Practicing and perfecting right speech is definitely done in the real world. Can't imagine the other people in the meditation hall be particularly happy if you start working with right speech in the meditation hall. So what else have we got? Ooh, it's 7:13. Well, we just did that, didn't we? Okay, well that looks like pretty much all that Nyanasaloka's got on this. So we'll go through what that circling in his words. Understanding, so right understanding wrong speech is wrong and right speech is right. One practices right understanding, the first factor, and in making an effort to overcome evil speech and to arouse right speech, one practices right effort, sixth factor, and in overcoming wrong speech with an attentive mind and dwelling with an attentive mind in possession of right speech, so we're mindfully speaking rightly, one practices right mindfulness, the seventh factor. Hence, there are three things that accompany and follow upon right speech, namely right understanding, right effort, and right mindfulness. Or right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. Interesting, right? The word understanding is used as a translation for both the first and second path factors sometimes, so it can be a little confusing there. Here, where they're saying right understanding, they're referring to the path factor Samma ditti. So I personally prefer the translation right view for Samma ditti. Okay, so I wonder if we've got any questions tonight. I can't see the chat room, so have we got any questions at all that could come through on my text? Sabata, have you got any questions coming? And if not, let's see what else I've got up here that might be interesting. I think I might have had something that was just basically interesting. Oh yes, so up in here, and this one is the Analysis Sutta where each thing is broken down. So here, right speech is broken down as Samma Vacca, you can see it there. Avoiding speech that is false, Musawada Weramani, Yako Bikawe, Musawada Weramani. So you can actually see part of the precepts formula there. Musawada Weramani, avoiding the wrong speech, is Pisunaya Vachaya Waramani, Farusaya Vachaya Waramani, Sampalapa Waramani. So we're avoiding speech that's false, divisive, harsh, or nonsensical. This is called right speech. So that's tonight's talk on right speech. Looks like it was about 50 minutes, not an hour. So I'm going to just finish off with what I should have started with, which is Namo Tassa. So I'll just finish with that, and then the Araham. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Saranam Gacchami. So I should have done that at the beginning. Sorry about that. And now just bow to the Buddha. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sankho